Hello, everyone. Super excited to be here. Thank you for having us. My name is Morgan Berman. I'm a Vice President of Partnerships with Techstars. And Techstars is the largest pre-seed investor in the world. Super excited to be joined up here with some amazing people to talk about the importance of strategic partnerships and how it impacts startups all over the globe. So turn it over for some introductions and then let's dive into it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mariam Hassani, and I'm the head of Trends and Innovation at the Abu Dhabi Early Childhood Authority. The Abu Dhabi Early Childhood Authority is a government entity based in Abu Dhabi, the capital of the United Arab Emirates, that's focused on the development of early childhood. We do this across four main sectors: health and nutrition, child protection, family support, and early care and education. And what we're excited to talk about today is our startup program that we actually run alongside our partners, Techstars, and our financial partners, Abu Dhabi Investment Office. And we really want to set some context as to how we make those partnerships happen and all the value that we bring to companies in the space.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Jillian Oakes, and I am the U.S. market lead for the Abu Dhabi Investment Office. We have an office here in San Francisco and also in New York City, launched at the end of 2021. We're the central government hub for supporting private sector investment into the capital emirate of Abu Dhabi. We support in a variety of ways in connecting companies so that they really land and grow in the emirate through facilitating partnerships, potential partnerships being the theme of today, but also through connecting to talents, to governmental programs, and we also have a financial support through a series of rebates, which is how we're involved in Angel Z.
Hello, my name is S.K. Lee. I'm a coach, angel investor, former founder, sold my first company in 2011, kind of grew a second startup from pre-seed to Series B in 2017. And I get the pleasure of coaching some of the really awesome founders that get to go to the Angel Z program.
Awesome. So it's interesting, thinking about startup communities, they are comprised of startups, corporations, governments, universities, nonprofits. In Brad Feld's book, Startup Communities, he kind of talks about all of these things. So curious, first question is, what would you say is the role of government and how important is the role of government in a startup ecosystem community? Maybe I'll start with you, Mariam, for that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's quite an important integral role. In our case, in early childhood development, being that it's such a niche sector in and of itself, not a lot of people realize it's so widespread, and that we focus on prenatal to the age of 8, although that does cut across multiple sectors and multiple industries. We find our role as government is essentially to enable the ecosystem for child development and to really support innovation within the space. So within the Angel Z startup program, we, of course, provide equity-free grants of up to $200,000 for these companies, that we attract global companies from all over the world that are tackling these pressing challenges that we're identifying. And it's essentially our role to ensure that these challenges are being addressed. And we find that working with innovative startups and companies are, in fact, the best way to do that. Not just within Abu Dhabi and the UAE, but even for the space as a whole, to making sure that there is a constant supply of innovation and interest within the space.
It's interesting because, from a Techstars perspective, we see the benefit of startups working with governments and corporates. And it used to be that startups would opt out of working with governments because it's hard, you don't want to go through the process, but we're seeing a lot of governments, like what you're talking about, kind of change that perception and making it more friendly to work with startups, which I think is absolutely critical.
I think that coming from audio, it's a little bit demystifying the support that governments can really play, not only for startups, but as you grow to scale up, and identifying opportunities that maybe aren't known beforehand, or a go-to-market where it's a pilot with an institution or a certain entity within the ecosystem that may not be readily known, especially if you're entering into a new part of the world.
I think government programs can be a really smart go-to-market hack. Particularly if you're a founder, it's lonely and hard enough as it is, right? But going into a new market, particularly with a mission-driven product or service, it is so tough to be able to do the policy changes, the advocacy, the fundraising, the product, the tech, all of the above. And if you've got a phenomenal partner like the one that is created with Anjal Z and many places around the world, it is like 3 steps ahead. You skip so many different processes that you would have to trudge through on your own. So it's an incredible opportunity for founders at the early stage.
It's identifying opportunities, but it's also helping with bottlenecks if you get stuck. I mean, a government partner can really help step in and see where you can help maneuver and get around in a new market.
Interesting point. So I want to stick with you, Julian, because that's an interesting point. And thinking about the Abu Dhabi and UAE, and why and how are they focusing and empowering startups in the ecosystem in the region?
Yeah, definitely. The UAE really sees the importance of the solutions that startups are creating and really the problems that startups are solving. I think it's really a top-down approach from leadership to see where there are gaps within the economy and how to fill those gaps. So if it's educational, if it's identifying a program to then create talent to come into the market in an area that there wasn't, or if it's through incentive programs, or if it's identifying technologies to then implement or bring in international companies, all with the goal to create a better future and enable the future generations.
So early childhood education is a passion of mine because I have 2 little kids, so I understand it. But question, like thinking about Anjal Z, how does that specifically support startups, especially in that early childhood education space?
So as a government-backed program, and one that we're very passionate about creating the right infrastructure in place and partnerships for our companies to thrive in Abu Dhabi and the UAE, and hopefully even the MENA region and the larger market that we have there. So it's very much about us also doing our part, where you're advocates on the ground, where you're champions, and it's all about us ensuring that if you were to take the market seriously and you are interested in pursuing it, we do everything we can to make those introductions. A lot of the partnerships in place are built on trust and built on as Jillian mentioned, it's very much our leadership's, vision and aim to make sure that the whole ecosystem is in place and supportive of these innovative solutions. Changing mindsets as well within government is no easy task, and that's something that we actually spend a lot of time on, creating the entrepreneurial ecosystem and mindset required to welcome these solutions and make sure that they can thrive in that environment. So within the program itself, we provide equity-free grants, we provide mentorship and partnership support, localization support, to really give you the best chance in tackling this market.
It's interesting. So when Techstars thinks about building new accelerator programs, and we have a theme or thesis, we tend to think of it as wide as possible, right? Cast a very wide net, so we can get learnings from anybody who applies, right? Figure out what's happening, what are we not thinking about, what's like in our blind spot, and what's around the corner. And then what happens when you do that from an accelerator standpoint is companies apply that may have never thought about a particular industry, right? They might just all of a sudden be a AI company and they have a use case for a particular industry. So thinking about that, what are some lessons learned from from this experience and work in the early childhood education space that can be translated across startups? Because there's probably a number of people here who are not in that space, but maybe you're thinking about it.
I think early childhood is a particularly interesting topic. It seems like it's actually really tiny, but in fact, it's actually huge, right? I mean, early childhood includes educational institutions, policymakers, prenatal health, family, physical real estate spaces, the kind of hourly gig workers that work in the daycare centers, so it's a workforce issue as well. There's all kinds of technology that is coming into running the operations of a business like that too. So it's one of those areas where if you can have a non-dilutive grant that gives you the opportunity to go into an international market day one, an international program. You are multilingual, multinational from day one, iterating, developing your product. And then you get to market by seed stage. My goodness, you've got traction, pilots, and you haven't given away a ton of your equity. That's a pretty awesome place to be. So I think it's great.
It's a great program. Everyone in the audience who's interested, you can actually find our QR code here up on the slide. But further on that, I mean, it is really incredible what we see in terms of just the applications we've been going through. And JALZ is actually in its 4th year now. We have just completed applications for the 4th cohort. We've got more than 350 applications from across the world, where we hope to narrow that down to a number of maybe 10 to 12 earlier stage that we hope to support with the program, but then also those 6 to 7 companies that have a validated product in their market and are interested to bring that and localize that to our region. We support with the equity-free grants in addition to the program itself. And really just seeing the diversity in the types of companies that are applying. Of course, EdTech is one that you think comes first to mind when you think early childhood development. But in reality, we've seen interesting companies, in potentially the urban planning space, health tech, specific companies and startups that target parents, practitioners, the education system as a whole. So it's quite widespread. And what we find usually is that they might not be focused on early childhood development or the earlier years, prenatal to the age of 8. However, in those companies that go across a wider spectrum, they then find it a lot of really valuable for them then to focus on those years through our program and show that they're dedicated to really build out the capacity in those earlier years and the product in those earlier years. And that's what they find most beneficial working with us, is that we provide them with the support that they need to do that. Potentially, sometimes we even support with, expertise in the field. When it comes to specific content-related matters that could differ according to region or market, we have the right connections in place for that as well from, the research and policy background and support that we offer.
If I may, not just for early childhood, but also for international companies coming into Abu Dhabi, I think they maybe come in with a partnership or a program with a governmental entity or another corporate partnership entity in the area, but then realize just the broader market that's available from the Gulf to MENA to North Africa, and then even some companies from the US who are running their APAC business. So I think there's a lot more opportunities, especially now with the free trade agreement with India, that opens up going international so early, as you mentioned, but then growing on those partnerships from government to academia to enterprise.
I want to shift a little bit and talk a little bit about strategic partnerships and the importance that partnerships play for startups. We see it from a Techstars perspective, right, as a company goes through a program like what we have with you, or when they get a partnership with AWS or Stripe or someone else at that early stage, it can fundamentally transform the business. Coming from someone who builds partnerships for a living, it's also very hard, right? It's very hard to structure them. It's very hard to put them together. There's conflicting interests, right? And so why do it, right? What's the reason for doing it? I'd love to get your take, and since you go around the horn a little bit, and of how it can fundamentally transform a startup by doing that.
I mean, it can be game-changing for an early-stage company. It can also be a space, partnerships, where you can waste a lot of time, burn a lot of cash, burn a lot of energy in a way that doesn't return the rewards or the progress that you really do need to make in those early days when you've got little of all of the above. So I think one of the most important things is, what is a good partnership? Does it really set you up for the long term? Is it going to fundamentally help you close more deals, build your product, sell it, and get it out into the marketplace, into the hands of consumers? And that is one of the unique things about this particular program. There are many around the world that do that. I remember in my second startup running around trying to open up the Latin American market and wasting so much time and energy, probably close to half a year. Whereas I've seen companies in this last cohort, 3 or 4 months, close 9 different pilots. For example, PikaPack or Margot at Enrichly shout out, who just launched 2 pilots, right, in the span of 6 weeks. That is unheard of in most markets. So I think it's game changing. And for products like this that are impact oriented, we're helping young children, families. You can't really argue with that, right?
Yeah, and I think partnerships come in all sizes, to not overlook if you're going for the big corporate or if you're going for a specific industry, not to overlook government, not to plug myself, but government partnerships or partnerships where you maybe wouldn't have thought could be fruitful. Because I think it's a great snapshot of what's going on in Abu Dhabi right now. It's very intertwined in terms of bringing together Abu Dhabi Inc., we call it, so all the different stakeholders who could then support and bring a company forward or be a catalyst of growth. So I would also encourage to look in places where you wouldn't necessarily see partnerships as a first priority.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, partnerships are important, right? I think we can all agree on that. And they're instrumental to, a lot of success that companies can find. But the other side of that, obviously, is that they're very difficult and they're very much, built on trust and a long type of relationship with that. So when you have the opportunity to work with a government entity that is obviously validating your product in the region, or supporting your growth and making those introductions for you. I mean, that's not to say that it's a breeze after that introduction. There's a lot of work that does get put in. Sarah mentioned 2 of our companies from last cohort that have seen great success. But that's only because they really put in the work for that, and we saw that dedication, and of course the partners that they're working with saw that for themselves. And I think maybe just to put things into perspective, of course we'll do everything we can from a partnerships perspective. We'll work on creating that infrastructure in place and make those introductions. But it is very much the founders and the company. It is like, whether it's a successful partnership or not is very much in the hands of the startup and the founders themselves.
Yeah, it's great. It's a two-way street too, right? I mean, it's on the startups to figure out how to get the right partnership. It's also on corporations and governments. I mean, if a government throws a giant RFP at the desk of a startup, I mean, founders are busy, right? We're busy building our company, so I'm not going to spend time replying to an RFP like an Accenture would. You just don't have the resources. So I think some of it is like a mindset shift in the government side as well, and we've seen that, right, in governments all over the world, and thinking about how do we actually say we're open for business? How do we make more inroads with startups? How do we, hang up sign on the door that says we're startup friendly? So I think it's a two-way street. Certainly it's the startups, but it's also the government and the corporates as well. I think we have time for one more question, and I want to just kind of go around the horn and ask, if you have just one piece of advice for startups as they're thinking about navigating a strategic partner landscape, nurturing those relationships as they're scaling, what would that be? I'd love to start with you, Miriam. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
One thing I would say is bottom line is there's a lot of programs out there that go untapped. And there's a lot of really phenomenal programs that can give you 2 or 3 steps of a boost, non-dilutive, partnerships in place, all these kinds of things that you should really take advantage of. Not every single startup, particularly ones with an impact focus, are going to be the hockey puck kind of Silicon Valley dream story, right? So why not start in another region, open up emerging markets, and then hop skip to the US? Who knows, right? So bottom line, government programs can be sexy.
Hard to follow. I keep coming back to, and this is so cliche, but get uncomfortable or try to be comfortable getting uncomfortable, because that's where growth happens, and that's where we really unlock or see opportunities that maybe you wouldn't have thought of, and especially, as you mentioned, SK, in areas that maybe you didn't think could be opportunities for you, so in other parts of the world, and working with partners from that part of the world.
Yeah, I mean, great advice, you guys. I think maybe just to build off of what was said, I think it's very much, again, as the ecosystems evolve, there's a lot going on in the UAE and the region at large with the KSA and the countries across the MENA. I think it's very important for us also to consider, like, as companies evolve and they really try to find their product market fit, it is, in fact, the ball's in their court, right? And we're trying to do everything we can to give them as much support as possible. And I think it gets better and better every year, every cycle that we do this. So we're really happy. We're super privileged to be in this position where we can support these amazing founders from all over the world in early childhood development, solving these issues that are so pressing.
That's great. We're out of time. I'm going to answer my own questions because I'm the moderator and I can do that. Look, being a startup and a startup founder is very lonely. It can be very lonely at times. And I think what's important is building that network, building that ecosystem, finding mentors and people who can help support you as you're on that trajectory, and partnerships play into that. So really appreciate all of your time. This has been a great conversation. We're around all the time if you want to chat. And thank you very much for having us. Hope you learned something.
Come find us.